Hi everybody, it's Maureen of Maureen 97 Designs, and today I wanted to talk to you about the new Creative Grids 10-inch log cabin trim tool duo. I am not affiliated with Creative Grids in any way, but I love their trim tools. I actually have 3 different log cabin trim tools from them, and I have the pineapple trim tool and the hexagon trim tool. And I think I'm going to do a video with the hexagon trim tool next, because I think that one was a little bit more tricky. It's hard to describe. Let me just not talk about that for now. Anyway, so this just came out, and I just watched the Shabby Fabrics video that she did on the trim tool, and I thought it was kind of interesting how she did hers. So I wanted to show you my take on it and how I do mine. So with Shabby Fabrics, she actually did a lot of the trimming, pre-trimming to the correct sizes, the recommended sizes for doing the log cabins, where you don't have to do as much trimming with the tool at the end of each round and at the end. But I actually am quite lazy in that I don't want to do a lot of pre-trimming if I don't have to. It does waste a little bit of fabric, but I'm going to show you something where I don't mind using up the fabric this way. So besides my trim tool duo, which by the way, let me go through this. If you're not familiar with it, it just came out recently. So it does, let me zoom in. Make sure you keep this little instruction pamphlet that comes with the trim tool, because you're going to want it for all the different things that it can do. It tells you exactly what sizes you need to cut your centers, which is very important for this trim tool. And then the recommended sizes to cut your strips, and when to do the trimming, how to line it up on the grid, and everything like that. So you can do regular log cabin or a skinny log cabin. You can do regular courthouse steps or skinny courthouse steps. You can actually do a duo, which is combining the regular size strips with the skinny strips. And then you can also do, what is this called actually? Where, oh, you can also do half log cabin blocks. So very versatile. I kind of wish this was the first trim tool I got, because like I said, I have 3, but you know, I don't mind that much, because while they are a little bit pricey, they're not super expensive, and I like the ease of using the different sizes to make the exact size block I want to make. So this one can make a 10-inch block, or it can actually make different size blocks if you don't just go through all the rounds. So yeah, this is a really versatile tool. And let me show you a couple of the blocks that I've actually made already. Let me keep this paper so you can see. This, oh, excuse me. This is the half log cabin, and this is the regular size strips, I think. Yeah, this is the regular size strips. Oh, sorry, let me get that in frame. So these are the regular size strips. I did half of the light, then half with the black. And this is one of my favorite blocks that I've ever made. And then this is the regular log cabin. I didn't do light and darks. I did this sort of gray and then orange. And then this is the duo, which I also really love, because you can see it has the regular size strips and then the skinny strips, and it's really cute this way, I think. And it goes around and around. And by the way, you might have noticed I've been using all of the same fabric for my blocks, and what I'm using is All Hallows Eve by Fig Tree and Company for Moda, and you might be able to tell just by looking at this, this is from a scrap bag. So I got a scrap bag with the All Hallows Eve collection, and it was one of those bags where it only had All Hallows Eve in it, which is really nice. So I was able to make all these matching blocks with my scrap bag, and because I'm using a scrap bag and it's kind of cheap, it makes me not so, not worried, but it makes me not so concerned about wasting a little bit of fabric. But then again, I don't really waste a lot of fabric because I keep all my scraps, like every single bit of scrap I use for something. If I'm not making scrappy quilts or scrappy somethings or crumb quilts or crumb strips or whatever it is, I keep even the tiniest little bits and I put them in old pillowcases and I sew those shut when they're full, and I use them as pet beds because we have 2 dogs and 2 cats and they like sleeping on stuff, especially comfy pillows. So I save everything. So even if I trim off a whole bunch of stuff, it's not going to go to waste in my house. So that's part of the reason why I love these trim tools, because you get really perfect results without too much effort, but it does create waste. So if you're one of those people who does not want to waste anything at all, then maybe this isn't for you. But for me, I love the ease of it, but at the same time you get such great results. Like as a beginner, I tried to make a log cabin block the traditional way by, carefully measuring out all my strips and trying to sew them carefully, and it came out just terrible. But with this, I made a really nice log cabin block my very first try with the trim tool, so I'm super happy with it. But anyway, this is what I have left. Oh, and this might make some of you cringe that I just throw all the strips in the bag like this and I don't bother folding them up. So yeah, there is ironing in my future, but this is all the strips I have left from my scrap bag at this point. And I wanted to show you something. So I talked about this in my scrap bag video. In case you haven't seen that, I'll put a link up here. And I'm not sure if I talked about it in there, but when I have the pieces, which this is the majority of what your pieces are going to look like, they're going to be these long strips with the selvage all the way across the whole length of the strip. So normally what I do is I will cut off my selvages and I'll try to save a little bit of the fabric with it. I don't just cut right up to the selvage line. I try to keep a little bit of extra fabric on there so that I can actually use these selvages to make selvage projects. And then I just kept the bag that it came in and I throw all my cut off selvages in here. And if I have enough of one line of fabric, then I can do something really great. If not, I can maybe do something small, or I can combine it with my other selvages in another bag that I have and make something a little bit bigger. But for what I've been doing with this is, because the log cabin blocks that I've been using, the regular size one, it suggests that you cut your strips at 1 3/4 inches. What I've been doing is going through the bag, and if I have fatter strips like this, you can see how fat that is, I will go ahead and cut the 1 3/4 inches off of here, and hopefully I'll have the selvage left with enough fabric that it'll make it worth saving for my selvage bag. But when I have a really skinny strip like this, where if I cut off 1 3/4 inches, I'm not going to have anything left. In fact, I might not even be able to get 1 3/4 inches out of the regular print part of the fabric. I might actually kind of get into the selvage with this one. So for these ones, I don't even bother trimming off the selvage because I know I'm not going to be able to use it for my selvage projects. This is going to end up going into a pet bed. So those ones I just leave. So I have a little pile here where you can see Most of these are trimmed, but then here was a strip. When I measured it, it was just barely over 1 3/4 inches, so I just left it as is. So let me just move this all to the side. And in case you're unfamiliar with how this works, basically you need to cut a block for the center, and it's always going to be a square, and it's always going to be very, very important that you cut this square exactly to the dimensions that they tell you to. And when I said save the instructions, I really mean it, because the instructions don't necessarily have, I mean, the tool itself does have some cutting guidelines on it, but it doesn't have all of them. So actually in the instructions for doing the half log cabin, it tells you that you don't cut your square at the regular 2.5 inches like you do for almost all of the other blocks. You actually cut a 2 3/4 inch corner square because you're going to be trimming the square down at the very end. So you need to have a little bit extra on that to be able to cut it down. So basically what I do is I just get my center square, and the reason why you need it to be exactly the right size is because that's how you're lining up your tool, is using the size of the square to line up on your tool. So if your square is off, if it's crooked, or if it's the wrong size, it's going to throw off your alignment with the tool, and then you might not get such good results. So for this one, I'm going to do a, I guess I'll do a light and dark again, or an orange and black, something like that. So what I do is, like I said, I've trimmed these down to 1 3/4 inches, or not, the ones that I couldn't really trim off nicely. So let's just use this. So what you do is you're going to need, for your very first step, you need something that is the same length as one of the sides. So I put it up, and I'll put it right at the beginning of that square. Let me zoom in, sorry. I'll put it right at the beginning of that square, so I don't have to trim on that side. But then for the other side, you actually want a piece that's the same length as this square, but I don't want to be that accurate. I actually really love cutting with scissors because it's faster and it doesn't have to be exact. So I'm just going to use my scissors to cut, and if I flip this over, you're going to see there's excess on that side, and I don't care that there's excess. It doesn't bother me, so I'm just going to leave it on there. And then what I'm going to do is stitch that 1/4 inch seam, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've stitched my 1/4 inch seam, and you can have a pressing mat and an iron right next to your sewing table if you have the space, and iron out, you know, set the seam and then iron it however you want it, open or to the dark side, or usually I put it to the outside of the whatever strip I just put on. I usually iron it toward that strip. But what I do for now, because I'm lazy, like I said, I just finger press this into place. And there you can see how there's that little bit of excess fabric that I didn't trim off. And then there's also the selvage up here, which, you know, don't freak out, it's there. But remember, when you're sewing it, if you do leave on the selvage, that you want to put this, you're not sewing the selvage into your 1/4 inch seam, that you put it on the opposite side, because that's going to get cut off. So now what I do is I just take my next strip, and let's say I'm going to use this black one. What you're going to do now is you're going to need a strip that's as long as this. Not necessarily as long as out to the selvage, because you're going to be cutting that off, but you want something that's roughly the same length as this whole side now that you have this extra strip in there. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to line up my strip, and I'm not going to even put that out to the selvage. You can see I can start it right there, and I'm not going to line it up with this part of the fabric because that is actually sticking out. I'm going to line it up with my square. Now in the Shabby Fabrics video, she said that she didn't like having this excess out here because she couldn't tell where she was supposed to be stitching. That doesn't bother me because I know that I cut my square correctly, so that if I line it up with the square and this strip is a straight line, that's going to be lined up correctly the whole length of the way, as long as I keep my strip, you know, straight and line it up correctly on this side. And then the same thing again, I trim it off. And what you can do is, if you want to, you can actually sew it first and then trim your excess. And you can trim your excess right up to that edge if you want. You don't have to leave it hanging off. You can use a rotary cutter. Any way is fine. It's up to you. This whole system gives you a lot of freedom to do it however you want. So I'm just going to sew that seam and I'll be right back. Okay, so there's my 1/4 inch seam. I'm gonna just, like I said, I'm just gonna finger press it. And that is my completed first round for a half log cabin. You're only gonna do 2 sides instead of the regular log cabin where you go on to all 4 sides. You just do 2 sides for the half log cabin, and then you're gonna need to trim it. So this is where your trim tool comes into play, and what you need to do is check your instructions and see where do you line it up. So for the half log cabin, you actually do line it up with the standard round 1, but you're only cutting on 2 sides instead of 4 sides. So let me put that down there. And then what I do is I line up, let me zoom in so you can see that. I'm lining up, you can see this is the white square is the standard round 1. You're going to line up this square with your middle square, and because your middle square is actually bigger than this, I'm going to line up the top line and the right hand line with my seam lines against that square, and that's my trim line. So then you just get that lined up like that, and then you trim the 2 sides off. And there you go. That's your first, oops, sorry. There's your first round finished. And it doesn't matter that this is hanging over the edge, because the other 2 sides are going to be trimmed at the very end when you're done with all your rounds. So that's all you need to do. And then, so I just go back to this light strip again, and I can put, let me get, here, this piece is trimmed. I can get this one, and you can see, because my edge is crooked, I'm not going to line it up straight with that beginning. And then I'm just going to take my scissors and cut most of the excess off and sew, and you just keep going around and around and around like that until you get to your very end, and then you're going to be, whichever round you want to stop at, you're going to be there, and then you trim off the 2 sides like normal, like you do at the end of the round. But then, if you're not doing the full, or, okay, stop. If you're doing the full 10-inch half log cabin, you're not going to need to turn your template. You're just going to cut it all the way around. So you probably want a rotating cutting mat for that, so that you don't have to move your trim tool. But if you're stopping anywhere less than a full 10-inch square, then you're going to want to cut the 2 sides, like I have here. Cut those 2 sides off, and then you're going to rotate it around, and you're going to cut off the other 2 sides so that you will have your perfect square. And that can be whatever size you want it to be. I could actually cut this off right now and just have a tiny little block with 1 round on it. So that's totally up to you. So I think it's really versatile, and like I said, you can pick whatever you want. You can probably even make up, and you know, more designs if you want to. So anyway, that's my take on the 10-inch log cabin trim tool duo, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, I'll see you later.